Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast. This is your host, Jared Mack, and today we have a mailbag episode. No longer Mailbag Monday, well, at least just for this week, so no alliteration. This is a Mailbag Wednesday, June 12th, 2024. Again, I am your host, Jared Mack, and with me is Erik Skopil. Erik, how are we doing today?
Really good. Been a while since the two of us have done a show. Excited to dive in here. A lot of cool questions here. We'll start with one focusing on your sport. But Jared, you just got back from a little trip down to Texas. Tell me about that trip, and tell me a little bit about the trip, and then tell me a little bit about the end to this Oregon baseball season, which I think was a success. What do you think? Give me the lowdown.
Yeah, I'll start with the trip. College Station is a hard place to get to. I'm not sure how much of our audience knows basically kind of where College Station is, but it's like north of Austin and north of Houston and kind of the middle of nowhere. So flew into Austin, drove to College Station. It's a hoot though. It's a great place. Well, maybe the town. The town is like kind of like Eugene. It's a college town. It's literally called College Station. But the games and the atmosphere were incredible. They had almost 8,000 fans on the second night. The first night was like 7,800. There was just incredible reactions from the crowd all weekend long. And the Texas A&M fan lived up to their reputation. You know, when Oregon was taking batting practice during game one, the Aggie fans, the 12th man, as they like to call them, were heckling players just in batting practice. And there wasn't anything mean that was said. Don't get me wrong. It was all, they were clever. They were creative chants. So that's where I give them a lot of credit. But to go on the season, obviously it ends poorly. They go 2 in barbecue and blow at one point 7-2 lead in game 2. They allow a 9-run 7th inning in game 2 as well, where Brock Moore just loses all control of his ability to throw a strike. Credit to him. He came out and talked about it afterwards. Just said he was losing his front side and he knew what he was doing wrong and he just couldn't fix it. And so that's really got to suck. So all in all, though, 40-win season. They finished the year 40-20. That's the 6th time since Oregon has come back and from when they disbanded the program. So since 2009, that's only the 6th time that they've had 40 wins. I think it was a good season. It's back-to-back super regionals. All 4 years under head coach Mark Wasikowski, they've reached a regional. I think it's a program that's up and coming. I think it was unfortunate for Oregon that they, excuse my French and my terminology, but they pissed down their leg in front of the national audience. And there were a lot of first-timer Duck fans who were watching that game saying, what the heck is this program? Like they need to cut it off again, things like that. So overall, in my opinion, as somebody who's watched this team, during my college days and now covering it for the last 3 years, it's grown immensely. And that'll lead us into our question as they go into the Big Ten.
Yeah, and just briefly on the fan discourse on this, did you see the post where someone suggested Wasikowski needed to be investigated by the FBI for betting on the Aggies?
I did.
What a cool theory. Fans, what a good time. Anyway, let's jump into this one to lead the show off.
We love fans.
Fans, they're great. Thank you for tuning in. This one from @LukeKintig. Probably butchered that one, Luke. You can DM me and let me know how to say your name. If you ask another question, I'll do a better job. We've had a couple people correct me, and it's helpful. All right, this is a baseball question, as Jared alluded to. As we move into a weaker baseball conference after consecutive super regionals, are the Ducks positioned to be a perennial powerhouse in the Big Ten? And who are their biggest threats? UCLA, USC, Nebraska? Jared, give us the lowdown here and kind of the Big Ten, what Oregon will be in your mind. And I guess just to his question, like, is this a conference they can be competing to win regularly?
Yeah, I think it is. I think in general, over the last couple of seasons, the Big Ten is a weaker baseball conference. I think this year they were better than I think a lot of people anticipated. They had a couple tournament teams. It was just Nebraska who won the tournament and Illinois. I couldn't remember off the top of my head, but those two teams were really good this year. Nebraska finished with 40 wins. They went 40-22, so a record pretty darn similar to Oregon. They did not win any of their regional matchups. So that wasn't a great look in the conference, but they got there. Illinois was 18-6. I'm looking at it right now, and they're in the Big Ten last season, 35-21 overall. So the problem is, it's like a lot of these teams struggled in conference play, and there's certainly some talent. Don't get me wrong, but it is a weaker conference than the Pac-12 normally is. I mean, the Pac-12 has some of the best baseball programs in the nation outside of the SEC. And over the course of history, in USC, UCLA, Stanford, Oregon obviously has only recently become a pretty good program on the West Coast, one of the better ones. Again, they brought the team back in 2009, but there's a lot of history on the West Coast. Oregon State obviously doesn't have the greatest history, but they've won three national championships, in the last 15 years. So that's pretty good, I would say. Just going out on a limb there, but it will be much different. I'm not, the travel thing. I'm sure I'll be asked this at one point during the year. I don't know what that's going to look like. From talking to people on the team, it seems like they will be chartering, so it really won't be that big of a deal. And I think that's going to be the case with a lot of the maybe the non-revenue generating sports like baseball, like other teams, softball, and whatever else there is, acrobatics and tumbling. But it'll be volleyball. Excuse me. It'll be fine for travel. I just think that Oregon will be amongst the best teams in the Big Ten for baseball, specifically going into this upcoming season. I think there's maybe going to be some lessons that have to be learned about playing in February and March in some of these places, but it's not like it's pretty and sunny in Eugene during any of these times. It's just colder in Purdue or Wisconsin. So maybe there's snow instead of rain. I don't think it'll be that big of a deal, but I do think Oregon, the way that they've recruited and developed talent over the last couple of seasons, it's clear that I think that they should be, I wouldn't say running the Big Ten, because I think UCLA is a program on the rise. I think USC is always going to be pretty good. I think Michigan has a lot of history as being a really good baseball team. Like, there will be years where Oregon might come in third or fourth, but I think they should be competing for a top spot every single year. And I think that should be the expectation moving forward.
I'll just ask one follow-up. Do you think playing, because obviously in the Pac-12, and you can correct me on the seeding stuff, you're much more dialed in terms of baseball, in terms of how they go about operating and selecting the teams and who gets the host. But does playing in a conference with maybe weaker overall talent hurt Oregon in a season where, let's say, they don't win the conference in terms of hosting a regional or something like that? Or just, I guess, how does this impact kind of the postseason for them playing in this conference, do you think?
It certainly can. I will say you can kind of negate that by scheduling harder non-conference opponents and at least bumping up your RPI. Like, again, Oregon State, didn't win the conference, didn't win the Pac-12 tournament, but was able to host because they played a lot of good teams out of conference. And again, the Pac-12 had a down year. So in most years, like, if you finish second in the Pac-12, even this year actually, with Oregon State, if you finish second or third in the Pac-12, you have a good chance of hosting. This year is just a down year. Like, Oregon was 52nd in the RPI, and that was the largest at-large bid to get into the tournament. So they were on the bubble to begin with. But I think in the Big Ten, there is a chance where if they finish third or fourth, it'll be kind of in a similar category. I do think that adding an up-and-coming UCLA team and a USC team that's been pretty good for the last couple of years, and then obviously Washington, I don't know, they were really good last year, and then this year they were bad.
Yeah.
So we'll see about that. But adding UCLA and USC to the Big Ten certainly makes it a more competitive conference. It just depends if, obviously, you have to win, and then if you add tougher non-conference opponents, like in a tournament like they did this year against Oklahoma and Texas Tech, then that'll help too. But it's kind of like a mixture of all of these things. They just ultimately, at the end of the day, like, you just got to win. You got to win 36 to 42 regular season games to really solidify yourself as a potential regional host.
All right, that's been Baseball Corner with Jared. Now we'll
There it is. Good
actually
10 minutes.
we might talk a little baseball here because this is a fun question. We haven't had a question really
Okay.
touching all the sports on this show in a bit, but this is from @Ducks or Quacks. Now that we're officially in the offseason for all U of O athletic programs, how would you rank them from most likely to least likely to win a championship heading into the 2024-25 athletic calendar? I didn't do a deep dive and look at every single program. Ducks or Quacks, I hate to say it. I know, is that lazy? I highlighted the 6 I thought were most likely to like be kind of in the conversation. I don't know what your research level was into this, Jared, but I'll be honest. I cover football. I cover women's basketball. I know for a fact women's basketball doesn't deserve to be on this list. They just lost 14 straight games to finish last season. I think they'll be better, but they're not a national championship contending team. I don't think really at all. Football, which is where I'll just start, like undoubtedly you look around the rankings and they're somewhere between 2 and 4. And most of these, whether it's the FPI, which ESPN released, which I think Oregon was second, or all of these kind of like way too early media top 25s where Oregon is like 2, 3, or 4. So they're certainly in that conversation. And I'd start there just because I'm most familiar with Oregon's football program. A couple others that I think had really good years this year that maybe will be good next year. Women's golf was a semifinalist in the NCAAs this year. I think they lost to UCLA in that semifinal round. Like one of the final 4 teams in the tournament. That probably should be discussed. I don't know the roster enough to tell you who's back, who's gone, but thought I'd throw them out. Women's track and field over the weekend finished 4th in the national championships at Hayward. They kind of have the edge because they're playing at home every year, which is like kind of a cool thing, kind of an advantage. You can ask maybe the Oklahoma softball program sometimes that can help out a little bit playing close to home and whatnot. I'd toss them in there. And then there was like 4 more that had postseason runs that were like kind of notable I'll just toss out here. Jared's baseball program making the super regionals should be discussed. Volleyball made the second round in the NCAAs. Men's basketball made the NCAA tournament, won a game, and softball played in the regionals at least. So I don't know. Those were the 6, and softball I just kind of threw in there. I know they lose an awful lot, so that feels maybe they don't necessarily are on that same tier, but those would be the teams I would mention that had good programs this last year. I don't know. I might have forgotten a couple, Jared, if you can catch me on that. But are there any other than, football to me, Jared, right? That's where we should start. But like, is there anything else? Is there another program that jumps out as number 2 to you or something?
You mentioned volleyball, right?
I did throw them in there. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. My brain kind of shut off for half a second. I think that sneaky, I think they're like the number 2 or number 3, them in women's golf. I think football is number 1. Well, I think you can make a case for either volleyball or women's golf. Again, I like you, Eric. I do not cover these programs. I do not have the depth of knowledge to understand whether or not these teams have brought back 90% of what they had a season ago in this deep tournament run or lost 90% of it. However, it is very hard to win a national championship in football.
Very hard.
And I'm not saying it's not very hard to do so in these other sports, but with golf and volleyball, it's kind of like baseball where there's a lot of, and I don't want to say luck, but there's a lot of, like football, it is just, sometimes you just get outmanned and out physicaled and you can't do anything about it. And you could be the more talented team and just lose. And I just feel like there is more certainty in those other sports where if you are the better team, then you're going to have a better chance of winning more games. And I feel like there's more chances for opportunities to win in those games, where football, sometimes it's just not your day. And regardless of how good you are as a team, like we see upsets all the time. And I don't feel as if there are as many upsets in those other sports. But again, I am not a women's golf reporter. I am not a volleyball reporter. So if I'm wrong in that idea that I had, please let me know. I'm sure I am. And I will be catching a lot of flack in the comments for it, but that's okay. I will stand by it. As for the other sports, baseball, I don't see it.
Yeah.
Not yet. They're close. They've almost got to Omaha the last 2 years, but when you watch Tennessee and UNC and all these other teams, Texas A&M for first, like when you watch those guys play, it's like, all right, it's just a different level of baseball. And I think that they might get there eventually, but I think that they're farther down on the list. And I think the same goes with men's basketball. Like
If
barely
Infalik comes back, they're like kind of interesting, but as a national championship contender, it's not.
it's
They're like
incredibly hard.
they're
They
like
barely
in
made the tournament last year.
right. They're like and they're going to the Big Ten, which is a better basketball conference, top to bottom.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
so I think football is right near the top, especially this season. And then I think it's probably women's golf and volleyball in the top 3. And then probably women's track and field.
They should be up there. Yeah, that's another
Yeah,
one.
I think that's my Mount Rushmore. Those 4 sports to steal a segment from part of my take.
Yeah, we probably land just about the same place. Again, if people want to correct us on like, oh, you talked about this team and they don't return anybody, or oh, this team is really up and coming and they have everybody back, correct us on that. We'll, I'm sure, do more research as we get closer to the fall when we actually start seeing these teams compete. But these are a little bit out of our purview.
For now.
Like this is kind of what we know right now. I did like 30 minutes of research on like, hey, this is how these teams all did this last year. I didn't do like a deep dive into like, oh, the 2024 recruiting class is really replenishing the volleyball front lines. Like I didn't get into that. So, but fun question here from Dr. Quacks, who always jumps in with good questions. Let's send it to a quick break here, and then we'll come back with 3 more questions. I think these are like basically all football questions. So buckle up for that part of the show.
All right, we're back. After our quick little break, we have 3 more questions remaining in this Mailbag Wednesday. Eric, take it away.
This one from @Barrio Gladstone. He asks, how is it that Rutgers is killing it in football recruiting and Oregon isn't?
Dude, shout out to Rutgers, man. They are killing it. Good for them.
I love that we can get a Rutgers football like talking point into a podcast.
Rutgers.
Yeah. Big Ten rival. Oregon doesn't play them for 2026.
They play them next year.
Is it 25? Okay, yeah, I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
So yeah, that rivalry really heats up here. And just to give context for what Barrio is getting at, Rutgers is 9th in the country recruiting, which is unbelievable to say.
Awesome.
And Oregon is 20th. Now, with all due respect to Rutgers, who frankly, this is amazing to me that they're a top 10 recruiting class at any point during a cycle. They're going to fade pretty quickly here. I mean, this is one of those where it's like, we're not even at half, if you think about it like in the context of a football game or a sporting event, like we're not even at halftime, like we're mid-June. This is when the recruiting really heats up. Rutgers has 23 commitments already. Like their class is like done, and it's a good class. They've got some really good prospects. This program is definitely on the ascension. I bet you it ends closer to like 20th, 25th in that range by the time this whole thing wraps up. Oregon is 20th with 9 recruits. Oregon has the
9.
4th. Yeah, not
single digits.
Yes. Yeah, they're just getting started. 8 of the 9 are blue chips. They have the 4th best by recruit average behind Ohio State, LSU, and Georgia. This is a class that I think is starting to take shape. And this month, we talked about it last week when Matt and I are on kind of previewing some of the visitors and what was going on. June is the month, and they already landed a couple of verbal commitments over the weekend, which, Jared, I don't know how much Zaire Addison or Dimitri Manning, film you've watched, but these are 2 offensive linemen that I'm really into, and I have some takes. So I figured we could kind of like segue into that while acknowledging that, like, yeah, Oregon's 20th nationally, but I think that I guess to wrap this question up, to like answer that one directly, it's early. It's mid-June. By the end of this month, they'll be probably close to a top 10 class, I think. And they have 9 commitments. They're basically all 4-star kids. Like this is a good start. It's just they're not on the same pace as Rutgers, baby. The Scarlet Knights are out. They're out there just slaying commits, 23 of them already. So, but yeah, have you watched much of either of these guys? Because I have some takes on both of them.
Yeah, I have. I wanted to do a quick Rutgers thing to kind of go into it a little further.
Yeah.
First, RIP James Gandolfini, big Rutgers guy. Shout out to Sopranos.
Yeah.
Look, like there's one kid that Oregon would take, and it's 23 kids.
Yeah.
So like no disrespect to any of them. Like, and it's Michael Thomas. It could be Tyreek Hayer, the safety, but like there's one kid in the top or two kids in the top 247. And most of these guys are all from the East Coast. There's a bunch of New Jersey kids, there's a bunch of New York kids, some Maryland guys, a couple Connecticut kids, like, and they're all lower on the totem pole in these recruiting rankings. And I know we can't live and die by recruiting rankings because there's the 3-star that everybody likes to point out that they were a 3-star and they weren't recruited and they're like the best thing since sliced bread, like Stetson Bennett was a couple years ago. But the kids at Oregon are trying to recruit are much harder to get a commitment from because everybody in the nation is trying to recruit. I am not worried at all. So that's just a quick thing. Had to point it out there. Shout out to Rutgers, killing it though. I love to see it. Excuse me. I watched some of Manning more than I did of whose name I can't remember. The 4-star kid, Zaire.
And to give Jared a little bit of credit here, he was traveling back from College Station, I believe, when this commitment went down. A little busy.
Yeah, a little busy. Manning is just ginormous.
Love this kid. I'm like really into this.
Yeah, I'm really into it too. He's a freak. I think he's listed at 6'7", 340, and I think it looks great on him. You know, like as weird as that may sound, like he could lose a couple pounds. That'd be great, but I think he moves really well. I think it's interesting that he's played on the interior of the offensive line. You kind of peg guys who are, phrasing. You kind of those guys are usually like 6'7", 340 types. Are more of like tackle prospects, but this guy can play in the interior, which I think is really intriguing. And it kind of goes to the Mario Cristobal philosophy, which I'm not sure if it worked or didn't work, but you just try to get the biggest guys and just try to teach them how to play football. And I think that's worked in some cases for sure, but I think this is one of those guys who might be more of a project than anything else. But I also think his tape, and maybe if he blows up during his senior season, like I think he could become like a borderline 4-star kid. He's not very highly ranked right now, but I think he's got the tools to become that kind of player, especially with his positional versatility. So I liked him, but as for the other guy, I just didn't watch a lot. I hate to say it.
No problem. I really like both these prospects. Like shout out to Alik for getting, first basically big recruiting weekend with official visitors for snagging both prospects that visited. Addison comes from Florida. We talked about him. He was my favorite high school film of any of these kids that visited last weekend. He reminds me a lot of a Johnny Cornelius, actually. Athletically, he's really smooth. He is 6'5", 290, like similar body types and frames. And when you go watch it, Jared, I think you'll kind of see what I'm getting at. Like, I just think there's a lot to like here. He plays tackle in high school. I'll be curious to see, is he a tackle in college? Like, I guess I'm just going to be interested to see the types of bodies they're bringing in, like how they want to utilize all these guys and how they fit together. But like left tackle in high school, maybe he's a left tackle in college, maybe he's a right tackle. But I really like this kid a lot. Really moves well. I think has some room to add some weight. But definitely some Johnny vibes. And then Manning, I came away like Stephen Jones with a mean streak. Like this kid's just a complete dickhead on the field. Like he's just so mean to everybody. And it's just like him bullying little like 250-pound, Seattle
Washington
area
prospects,
Seattle area defensive ends and stuff for like 3.5 minutes. I think it's like a 3.5 minute film. And I want to say like all but 2 clips end with a pancake. Like he just puts everyone on their ass. So
that's what he should do. Like
he's just crushing kids.
Not that that's a bad thing. It's like he should be doing this.
It's exactly what you want to see. I love it. I have no idea how he's in pass protection because Bellevue runs like all of this funky stuff from the 80s where there's like 3 people in the backfield. Yeah, there's like 6 people in the backfield and then they just power it into people. But he's just a freight train once he gets moving. And I like this kid. I know he's ranked a little lower. I do think he's a guard, but I also was like, oh man, imagine if you have Shaq McRoy and Dimitri Manning at like your right side of an offensive line. Just road graders, like 6'7", 6'8", 330, 350, big dudes that just want to mash on people. So I I like both these kids. I thought we'd do a little recruiting corner here since they landed 2 commitments over the last couple of days. So I'm into it. I think, again, Addison reminds me of Cornelius, and Manning reminds me of Stephen Jones with a little bit more of an edge to his play.
Mm-hmm. I think Alik kind of has a type of offensive lineman he likes to see. It just seems like he's just recruiting taller kids for the most part. Like guy like Trent Ferguson last year, who's definitely more of a project, is like 6'6", 6'7". I can't remember what his recruiting ranking was off the top of my head.
I think 6'7" was what he was listed as.
Yeah, like, and then obviously McCroy is one of the largest human beings I've ever seen in my life. And then again, Manning is not a small kid either.
No.
And then when we talk, other kids 6'5", 290. So again, not a small guy. So I think that there's kind of a type with the league, just recruiting the biggest birds, and maybe that's kind of something that that rubbed off from Mario, and because Alik as a GA was working with offensive line with Mario and Alex Mirabal, who was a great offensive line coach. So maybe there's kind of that, but I think he's done a great job so far. Mm-hmm. I think last year was a little tough because I forgot we had Cooper Patagna on probably about like this time a year ago, and he was just like, the offensive line market isn't great this year, and he was talking about the kid who went to Mater Dei.
Brandon Baker, I think.
Yeah. Gary Baker's younger brother.
Yep.
And he was just like, most years this guy wouldn't be this highly rated, but there's just not a lot of good offensive tackle prospects. So, and all Alik did was get one of the bigger projects in Shaq McCroy, but also a guy who, if he pans out, could be an everyday right or left tackle and just become an absolute monster in the Big Ten. And something like Amarius Mims was for Georgia this past year before he went in the NFL draft. Just a ginormous human being who can move and get out into space. So again, I think Alik's done really well. We'll have to see how this goes down the line in terms of when these kids come to campus, when other guys leave, like when Josh Connerly and Johnny Cornelius leave, who's going to step up? Is it going to be one of his kids? He's going to go out and recruit in the portal, blah, blah, blah. But that is a discussion for a different day.
Yeah, and then I think you nailed it on the Mario stuff because Miami was heavily involved in both recruitments. These are kids that the Hurricanes also really wanted. So I think you're right in terms of maybe Elite kind of shares some of that scouting in terms of identifying types of players that Mario and Miro will pass down. Yeah, and it's not bad at all.
Pretty good thing. Yeah, like, again, for as much criticism as we have displayed and our message board has displayed of what we thought of the Mario tenure here at Oregon, those offensive lines were always pretty damn good. And if Elite can learn from those two guys, I think that's a huge positive moving forward.
All right, fourth question from @Ross Maselich. What position group needs to recruit and sign a 2025 impact player the most? And who are some of those potential candidates? And he has 3 position groups: offensive line, safety, and tight end. #Autzen Audibles. Offensive line, Ross, I think we just kind of covered. I think they landed 2 impact guys. I not that they don't need to continue working there, but I feel like they're off to a great start. And in general, yes, I think there's need there. We talked about it coming out of the spring game. I have some light depth concerns, especially on the interior, but I think they're going to be fine. And the portal's been so friendly to them, especially with offensive linemen. Like, they've done a good job of going and getting a Johnny. They're going, I think Bedford's going to work out. I guess last year, a couple of the guys they got with Angulau and Strother that didn't super land, neither really played, but they've been able to at least go get some quality pieces. I have no doubt if they need to go find whatever it is, another right guard, a left tackle, a right tackle, they probably will need to find those players. They'll be fine in the portal. I don't expect a high school player to jump in as a everyday right tackle right away. So I went tight end, which I think is kind of where we have to go. Yeah. I'm jumping on the bandwagon, Jared. They only bring back next year Sadiq, Saliapaga, and Pugliano in terms of scholarship tight ends. We don't really know what Saliapaga or Pugliano are at all. These guys just got here. I haven't watched these guys play a single snap in a real counting game. Sadiq, I'm super intrigued by. all the athletic tools you could ask for. Like clearly Will Stein wants to get creative and do fun stuff. Like we saw in the spring game, he lined up at like every offensive position besides quarterback and offensive line. But they need to get some tight ends in this class, and they're visiting 3 of the best 6 in the country coming up here. So here are the potential candidates. They're bringing in Lincoln Cure. What day is today? In 2 days.
11th, 12th, excuse me.
2 days. You said to start the show. I should have remembered. On June 14th, Lincoln Cure, number 2 ranked tight end in the country out of the state of Kansas, will be here for a visit. The following weekend, Desan Brame, also of Kansas, and Caleb Edwards, I think SoCal kid, both coming in here. That's player 5 and 6 at the position for official visits on the 21st of June. These are the names. And if I'm Oregon, I'd love to get 2 of these guys. I think especially the body type difference here with these guys compared to like Sadiq and Saliapaga, especially who are like receivers becoming tight ends, a little shorter. These guys are all like 6'5", 6'6", 240, 250. Like I just think those guys, like you could convince me you could bring in 2 guys and they could have. Remember Terrence Ferguson and Maliki Matavau as true freshmen like in 2021?
Buddy, do I? Yeah.
They just showed up and were dudes. Like I think you could pull both 2 of these guys, and the same sort of thing could happen, and it would maybe relieve the stress of hitting the portal. So Oregon actually has the crystal ball for Brame right now, and so got to get 2 of these guys, in my opinion. And if you do, you're really set up for the long haul, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with tight end as being the number 1. I will talk about safety instead, though, because I think we'll give we just went over offensive line, so I think going over safety will help. But quick thing on the tight end, I think the fix is going to be more from a transfer portal addition than anything else, because
that could be true too. Yeah, good call.
Because they need inline blockers, man. They need to replace Terrence Ferguson and Patrick Herbert, who are both like 6'6", 245 pounds at minimum. And like you went through, Eric, Kenyon Sadiq is not that. He is not going to be a guy who's in 12 or 13 personnel where you're going to comfortably rely on blocking a D end or an outside linebacker, a Jack or a Mike. Like that's just not his thing, and that's fine because he can do a whole lot of other things on the football field, which are great. They need big boys. They just need big boys. And for the high school kids, Brame is a big boy, but he's going to need to add 20 pounds. 15, 20 pounds like immediately. And even then, who knows if he'll be physically strong enough to go against Big Ten outside linebackers. So moving on to safety, Oregon will not return a lot of their safeties next year, just like they did this past season. Tysheem Johnson, I think technically still has another year of eligibility, but
I don't know, man. Does he? It's so hard.
Know.
We're just guessing.
He's a 2020 kid. I think this is his 4th year. So I don't know. Tysheem Johnson has 1 more year, and if he doesn't, oh well, he's still gone. So I think he's gone after the year. Kobe Savage is gone after the year. He just does not have any more eligibility left.
Are we sure, Jared? Are we sure?
I'm not 100% sure, if I'm being honest.
And the COVID year is just ruining all of this. Just for half a decade.
We're getting close to the end. To the end.
Wake me up when it's over, and I can just be like, this guy's a senior. He's
Cam
done.
McCormick will still be playing in 2042.
Oh man, goodness gracious.
Brandon Johnson, who will be on campus for the summer and fall camp, who we did not see during spring camp, who is likely going to play the nickel position in Oregon's defense. He will be in his 4th year. So he, again, might have eligibility left, but he's a really good prospect, and I think that he'll just be gone regardless. So those are your 3 starting safeties. Gone. You return Aaron Flowers. You have Kingston Lopa, who's a true freshman. Cody DeCambra hit the portal, and then Tyler Turner is back there too somewhere. Like
Peyton Woodyard.
Peyton Woodyard, excuse me, I forgot about Mr. Peyton. Still has years of eligibility left, many years.
Yes, all of them.
All of them. You have Flowers and Woodyard are obviously like your 2 dudes, and then in a perfect world, Woodyard is your nickel or your strong, Lopa is your free, and then Flowers is your nickel or strong. That's the perfect world, right?
I like that a lot. Yeah.
Will it happen?
I don't know.
I don't know. I really like Aaron Flowers. I really like Peyton Woodyard's tape. Kingston Lopez, ginormous. Great things to have. But then again, we're talking about depth here, right? Or we're talking about impact too. But the depth behind the safety position, if those three guys, like I said, the Lopez, the Woodyards, and the Flowers of the world, if those are your three starters going into 2025, which is kind of a pipe dream to begin with, there's no depth. There's nobody back there. It's Tyler Turner as of right now. And like, that's it. And then walk-ons, Marko Vidakovic, or his ghost of Marko Vidakovic is back there.
Are we sure he's on the team?
I don't know. I don't think he is. That's why it's his ghost. Yeah. So that's what's back there. And I know this isn't answering the question of like, we need an impact guy immediately, but you just might, because I'm not sure those three safeties are going to be your starters next year. And there's a lot of really good safeties in this 2025 class. I'm not sure who the guy is that's going to come in and become an immediate contributor. But the nice thing is about the safety position, if you're that good enough, you will see the field. Like, I think Aaron Flowers is that good enough and will see the field in the Cole Martin role from a season ago, but just be a better version of Cole Martin. So I think it's certainly up there, but again, I would much rather see them go harder after tight ends, because I don't think people understand how important it is that Patrick Herbert and Terrence Ferguson are, ginormous people and can block and can get out and catch a pass or two. Everybody loves that Terrence Ferguson can go rumble and stumble for 30 yards and pick up 30 yards through the air. But I think it's imperative that Oregon is able to run that 12 and 13 sets on offense and get some tight ends who can actually block an edge. And that will not be the case next year unless they add to the portal or add a ginormous person in the 2025 class. But looking at the top tight ends, like, it's just Keati Armstrong, who's uncommitted and a giant human at 6'6", 248. But I don't think that Oregon is really. I still think that Brame and Lincoln Cure are their top targets.
In terms of safeties to know, they are hosting Kanoa Winston from Gonzaga, but in Washington, D.C., not my alma mater. Same high school as Caleb Williams this weekend. Mm-hmm. Third best safety in the country, 43rd ranked player. That's a scheduled visit. We'll try to get confirmation that he is here once that closes. But that's the only scheduled official visit right now in terms of safety. So that might be a name just to know there. But I don't think that's a recruitment that's like super Oregon lean right now. But who knows? Official visits change a lot of things. And we'll have a recap hopefully on the site after that. All right. There's your recruiting talk. And we're going to finish with this one. We're going to send off the Pac-12 with a question from @Nash_Duccaneer. With the end of the Pac-12 officially upon us, what have been some of your most memorable moments covering Oregon athletics over the past 10 to 15 years? #Autzen Audibles. There's been a lot. You know, I was going through this last night when we were kind of looking through the questions, and I'm really excited for the Big Ten. I think everybody should be. It's going to provide. I think it's going to pay major dividends in football, especially in terms of just the national landscape. And there will no longer be the questions of like, oh, are they good? Or are they Pac-12 good and whatnot? Because they're going to be in the Big Ten. They're going to be playing some of these national brands. They're going to get a chance to kind of, show that they stack up with Ohio State or Michigan or Penn State on an annual basis. But there's been some really fun times in this conference. And I'm going to be honest, I'm going to miss going to like Salt Lake City. I love that game. I thought that was an awesome environment. It was a kind of a cool, like pseudo rivalry. I don't know if we decided if that was a rivalry or not, but there was like a 2 or 3 year period there recently where it was like the Pac-12 championship went through that game. Those two teams were kind of right at the top of the league for a couple of years. And it was really a fun rivalry. I'm going to miss going to Pullman, as crazy as that sounds, just for the football games. It's a fun football game atmosphere. It's a tiny little stadium. It's right on top. It's
an 8-hour drive in the middle of nowhere.
It is, but I enjoyed covering games.
I went to Pullman once, and I'm glad I'll never go again.
Okay, fair enough. I also went to school in Spokane, so I've been to Pullman many, many times.
Fair enough.
I'm just throwing out, and then I guess just a couple of things that are kind of, these are more tangential answers. There's some cool people that cover like Utah and Arizona State and Colorado and Washington State in particular, that like people from those schools that I've kind of become friends with in the 24/7 Sports Network. And it's going to be kind of a bummer not to be catching up with them every year. Oh, I forgot to mention like Jackson Moore, who covered Cal and Stanford. He was on our podcast like 9 times every fall because he had like a billion teams he covers. Like it's just kind of getting to know and meet some of these guys was really fun. And now we'll meet and get to know different people from different parts of the country. But that part's there. Going to Pac-12 Media Day and catching up was always kind of a good time. So those are some of the like more kind of tangential things. Pac-12 title football games 2019 and 23 were both different results for Oregon, but both good times and fun games to cover. And then the thing I wrote down, which is weird, was it was so strange covering games during the pandemic season in empty stadiums and empty basketball arenas. Like, I know that's weird to bring up, but when I was thinking of like the most memorable things, like you could hear Kelly Graves dropping F-bombs at the officials, like from the stands, because there's no one in the crowd. And you could hear like from even up in Autzen, you could like hear some of the back and forth with the players. It was so weird. So those moments will stand out. And then the last thing I wrote down was just the Sabrina era of women's basketball, which I don't know if we'll ever see again, but just what she brought to this community and how good the Pac-12 conference was and how dominant, especially that final season they were. Obviously that was kind of cut short, but those are just some things off the top of my head here. And obviously there's some other games, but I felt weird if I would have bring up like, I missed Oregon winning at Ohio State as Oregon leaves the Pac-12 and enters the Big Ten. But those are some kind of Pac-12 centric things that popped to my brain as we were looking through this.
There's a lot of good memories. I have not been a part of the Pac-12 coverage, at least not as long as you have, Eric. And I think that like some of the better memories I had were when I was an intern in 2019, 2020, that time frame where, like the Sabrina-led Oregon team was incredible to watch that year. I went to a lot of games and served as year number 2. I served as the number 1 for the first time when Oregon beat Team USA. So that's right. That was a trip. Yeah. So that one was certainly a mix of emotions, but certainly a very memorable one, just because it was, wow, what a great game. Like Team USA is going to lose to the Ducks. And then it's like, holy shit, I have all of these responsibilities and I'm a dumb 21-year-old. What am I going to do? So I look back on that very fondly. The 2020 Rose Bowl, I was fortunate enough to be able to cover that as an intern too, and was down there for a couple of days. That is always going to be one of my favorite moments. I grew up that the Rose Bowl was not only just the granddaddy of them all, but I don't remember a year in my life where it was New Year's Day and I wasn't watching the Rose Bowl, because both my parents are from the Los Angeles area. They both went to UCLA. Like the Rose Bowl is sacred in our house. And while it will still be continuing, it will not be, I don't know what they're going to do for the matchups there, obviously. When it's, I guess with the 12-team playoffs, it'll always be a playoff game. But thankfully, we don't have to think about it. But it was always, a Pac-12 game. It was as simple as that. And so that's going to be really sad to see go. But I think other moments were, I don't really know if there's a Pac-12 moment, but seeing Oregon baseball kind of become better, I think has really meant a lot to me. I've just kind of watched that team grow, and I've been around them so often that it's just good to see some of those kids do well and get drafted, guys who you weren't really sure about but have found something, and you're just you're happy for them in the rest of their career, because they know, like, I saw them when they stunk and now they're, being drafted in whatever round. So I think that has really meant a good amount to me, whether that's just postseason baseball or, regular season Pac-12 baseball. But I think there are some things about the Pac-12 I will not miss. So maybe we can get to that, but maybe this would be more of a sentimental thing.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that I might miss from the Pac-12 is Bill Walton.
Great answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I kind of wanted to talk about it. I don't know if you guys touched on it on any of the podcasts while I was away, but I think that's going to be, I don't think it's any surprise that, 2 days after the last Pac-12 official scheduled event in the Pac-12 baseball tournament, Bill Walton passes away. Like he lived 48 hours without the Pac-12, and that was too much. And I think that I think Bill Walton is one of the most maybe one of the most important basketball players of all time, but certainly one of the biggest influential and spokespersons about the Pac-12 in the history of its program or the history of its conference. I'm not sure there's been a bigger supporter of the Conference of Champions than that man. So I think that's what I'm going to miss the most. I just think it's just 1 and 1. It's like when I really think about the Pac-12, I see the face of Bill Walton for better or worse. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing that I miss about the Pac-12.
I think in like 10 years when they're commemorating and kind of running through how crazy the conference is just lack of existence is, and they're doing a documentary or something, this will feature prominently is the fact that, like you said, Bill Walton wasn't about to make it into an era where the Conference of Champions wasn't in existence. Like the timing of that still blows my mind. It's, and obviously tragic passing. It's awful. He's gone. I will greatly miss watching games. Just putting on a Pac-12 game on a Thursday, and it's like Arizona State and Colorado. Who cares? But he's out here saying all sorts of weird stuff, like rubbing dirt on his arms. Talking about the 70s and different concerts he went to and stuff, like books he's read. Like, what a legend this guy was.
When I first came to Oregon, so I think it was 2016, and was a student, and I went to an Oregon men's basketball game where Bill Walton was covering it or on the call.
Yeah,
it felt like I was in the presence of God. This man. I don't. My parents loved Bill Walton, obviously, because he was a UCLA guy, and they were kind of on campus in a near timeline, but. He was just like the man in my house. And then when you see him in person, you're like, oh my God, that guy is ginormous. I don't know how people can get that tall. But it was like I was in the presence of a mythical being. It's like, oh my God, there's Bill Walton in his tie-dye shirt. So yeah, I think maybe that's kind of like it's a different answer, I'm sure, than people are expecting. But I really do think that that's what I'm going to miss the most about the Pac-12. It's Bill Walton.
Just one last thought, because I kind of jogged my memory. I think he was on the call when Dylan Brooks hit that game winner against UCLA, which is undefeated. Lonzo Ball was on that team for the Bruins. I didn't cover that game for whatever reason. I can't remember if I hadn't started or if I was like off for the night, but I was with my ex-girlfriend and one of my good friends, Colin, who Jared has met several times. And it was just like one of these games that I'll always think about because it was so crazy that it happened. It just didn't seem plausible they were going to win. And it was such a big shot. And I was seated and I just saw Bill Walton's reaction to it. And I think he was like kind of protesting that Oregon fans had run out into the court and whatnot and said maybe it should have been a technical foul, which pissed off people on our message board. But that game I hadn't thought about it. That is one of my favorite games that I wasn't covering, but that I've watched in person, from an Oregon athletics perspective. So I thought I'd just throw that out there. And Oregon and UCLA will continue to play each other in this new conference. But from a Pac-12 perspective, that was one of my most memorable basketball games I think I ever watched.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if I have my most memorable game. I think it's probably the Rose Bowl.
It's a heck of a game.
Like the biggest. I think it's the biggest sporting event that I've ever been to. I think I went to the Fiesta Bowl and we got a couple Pac-12 championship games and the Pac-12 baseball tournament, obviously. But I think the Rose Bowl takes the cake for me, at least from a media perspective, a coverage perspective of like, this is the most important thing that I've been to.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's a game I covered that feels more consequential. I mean, Honestly, that Ohio State game was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And I mean, it doesn't have the same mag. I'm just trying not to say it had the same answer because Rose Bowl's, but that stands out and whatnot. But that whole trip to Columbus, man, did not think that was what was going to go down. So, and maybe that's a good way to bridge into this next conference because Oregon, Ohio State this fall, that's a tough ticket to get. And it's going to be really fun to have that show coming west this time. So anyway, I don't know. I don't think I have much else on the close of this conference. I really enjoyed it. I'm really excited for the Big Ten. And we'll keep covering all this stuff. And I think the Ducks are going to do pretty darn good in a lot of these sports. So the ride should continue.
The ride hopefully will continue. However, this one is not. This is the end of the Autzen Audibles podcast. Thank you all for listening. If you can, give us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to us. And in the comments section below, say something. That's all I got. So, Erik, been a pleasure. We will catch you all on the next episode of the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.